Welcome, everyone, to the Ready for the Draft podcast. I am your host, Gregg Schutze. This is episode 32 of the 2024 podcast series, where we take a look at the draft-eligible prospects and get you ready for the NFL draft. And I'll tell you what, the countdown is truly on. We are just days away from the NFL draft beginning on Thursday, April 25th in Detroit, Michigan. I'm recording this the evening of Monday, April 22nd. So again, yes, we're just a few days away. You can see the draft on the calendar. It's not too far away. The Bears officially will be on the clock here in just a matter of days. And what we've been doing with this podcast series, the last few podcasts, have really been about NFL by the numbers. And analytics, they have their numbers. I like to do things a little bit differently when we look at the NFL draft. In order for us to really understand this year's NFL draft class, you also have to look at the past. And what does the history tell us? We take a look at the last 5 years and the last 3 years as well, because the 3 years really tells you even more than what you're going to see over the last 5 years, because a lot could change in just a couple of those years. And we take a look at it, and at each position, just how many players are going to come off the board in each round. And then not only that, can we predict that piece, but then also which players are going to come off in each round of the draft. So we've done that with the entire offense, skill position, and in the trenches. We've also done that with the front seven on defense. Now we're going to take a look at the secondary. We're going to get the back end of the defense, both the corners and safeties. We're going to be looking at both groups. And then we'll jump into the specialists at the end, because look, the specialists are a part of the draft as well, and they're going to shape this year's draft class. So, they're a part of that shaping. So we're going to take a look at the defensive backs, and I think it's a really interesting story when you look at the DBs and where everything is being ranked. When we look at this group, 2023, we had 4 defensive backs taken in round 1. They were all corners: Devin Witherspoon, Emmanuel Forbes, Christian Gonzalez, Deontay Banks. All of these guys look like they can be studs at the next level. Emmanuel Forbes got off to a rocky start there with Washington, but I think this is the guy. Look, he was a playmaker at Mississippi State, 6 pick sixes in his career. Just needs to get things going for him, hopefully here in his second season. Total of 58 DBs taken in 2023. 2022, we actually saw 7 DBs. We saw a good mix of corners and safeties in this draft. We saw Derek Stingley and Sauce Gardner go 3 and 4 in the draft. Kyle Hamilton, you'll remember, runs that slow 40 time, somehow falls to the Ravens sitting there at 14. Ravens get a steal. Trent McDuffie has stepped up for the Chiefs, 21 overall. Kaiir Elam, a bit of a surprise at 23, going to the Bills. He really hasn't gotten things going just yet. And then you had Daxton Hill and Lewis Seen coming off the board, 31 and 32 overall at the end of round number 1. In 2022, we saw a total of 56 come off the board. In 2021, another 5. And this was, again, a group of corners. We saw, again, a couple of corners coming off the board in the top 10. J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, 8 and 9 to the Panthers and Broncos. Pat Surtain, look, he just like his dad, he's getting it done there in Denver. Caleb Farley had battled some injuries. He still goes 22 overall to the Titans. He needs to work himself back into a starting role there. Greg Newsome is now the nickel there with the Browns. He went 26 overall. Eric Stokes, kind of a rocky start to his career there with the Packers at 29 overall. 2021, we saw 59 DBs taken in that draft. I mean, it's a staggering number. But when you think about it, with the way that the passing game has been at the NFL level, you need to have guys. You need to be 3, 4, 5 corners deep. You need to have 2, 3, 4 safeties who can play both in coverage and in the box. 2020, another 2 corners taken in the top 10 with Jeff Okudah and C.J. Henderson at 3 and 9. A.J. Terrell looking like a stud there with the Falcons. He's really the steal of the draft, all the way down to number 16 overall. Damon Arnett, didn't pan out with the Raiders. He went 19 overall. Noah Igbenogany, to Miami at 30. He's bounced around in the league. And then the late Jeff Gladney coming off the board there at number 31 overall. And with that draft class, You look at 50. Only 50 that year, the DBs. But again, I look at some of the names in that draft. Cameron Curl, Geno Stone, and Dane Jackson, all taken in round number 7 of that year's draft. I mean, think about that. We're going to take a look at each of the rounds, who were the steals. But, man, you landed these guys. Cameron Curl, 216, Geno Stone, 219. What do you have, 7 picks last year? Dane Jackson was a starter for the Bills, the past couple of years, 239 overall. And then in 2019, this was really a thin draft at the top. A couple of safeties, Darnell Savage and Jonathan Abram coming off the board at 21 and 27. They're no longer with their teams that drafted them, the Packers and Raiders. And then DeAndre Baker, 30 overall, also a guy that didn't pan out. This was a draft that I think got stronger as the draft went along. 51 total taken in that year's draft. So when we look at it, we're talking about total guys taken. 3-year average, right at about 58, because we saw 59, 56, and 58 over the last 3 years. And then about 55 with that 5-year average. So we're picking up steam when we're talking about the total number of guys drafted, right? So when we look at the first round, and we're looking at about 5 is the average. When it comes down to it. 2022, I know we had 7 thrown in there, but just 4 last season. But 5 feels about right, and I think that's what we're going to see this year. There's a couple of other guys that could come off the board in round number 1, but 5 feels like the right choice. And I'm looking at my number 1 corner on the board is Quinyon Mitchell. Out of Toledo. And this guy has done everything asked of him and then some. He was a playmaker there at Toledo. If you've listened to my podcast, I've been on Quinyon Mitchell from day one. I've been a huge fan of his. I've been talking him up. 6 foot 195. And here's the thing with him. He's the ball skills are evident, right? 6 interceptions, 2 of which were returned for touchdown in 2022. Had 5 interceptions that year. 45 pass breakups in his career, 125 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss. First team All-MAC honors twice, second team All-American in 2023. Primarily used in off-man and zone coverage at the Rockets, but it was ultimately that Senior Bowl that really sold everyone, because obviously in that zone coverage and in off man you could see his ability to drive on the football, and then once he arrives there he knows what to do. The ball skills obviously are evident, and he plays with that physicality and the change of direction. He's so explosive, but you show up at the Senior Bowl, you play press man, silence those doubters, just showcasing the ability to play up on the line against some of the nation's top receivers at that Senior Bowl. Physical at the line, fluid hips to turn and run, always seemed to be right in the receiver's hip pocket. Then he furthers his case, running that 4.33 40 at the combine, third fastest among all combine invites. Showed off explosive lower body movement with that 38-inch vertical leap. Repped out 225 20 times in the bench press, topped out that corner group, was tied for second among all DBs. So the strength is absolutely there. So he's fast, he's explosive, strength and power to jam the receiver, can reroute. This guy does a little bit of everything. Does a great job reading the quarterback's eyes, triggers downhill, and again arrives looking to make a play on the football. In the MAC championship game against Miami of Ohio, he's up on the line with Gage Larvidan, who was a decent receiver there at Miami, able to flip those hips, turn and run on a post, remain in phase, patient, in perfect position to make a play, timed that jump, elevated, punched the ball away, making it look so easy down the field, just reaching with his outside arm across the receiver to easily punch it away. He's not afraid to mix it up in the run game. To me, he's the number 1 corner. I just don't think he's going to be the first corner off the board. I really don't. I think what you're going to see is Terrion Arnold, 6 foot, 189 pound, redshirt sophomore. And look, you can't go wrong with these 2 guys. I think they're clearly the top 2 corners in this year's draft. And with Terrion, this is a guy who finished his redshirt sophomore season, 5 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, also tallying 63 tackles, 6.5 of those going for loss. Fearless, will get right up on you, fluid hips, vertical speed to run with the receiver, stays in phase, does a good job locating the ball down the field, uses impeccable timing with his hands to make a play on the football, can change directions on a dime, drives downhill on the football in a hurry, will attack the ball at the catch point. I saw him, this one rep against Lab McConkey, he ran a dig route. Arnold's in press coverage. You saw these fluid hips in his transitions. McConkey cuts across his arm. Cuts across to the inside. Arnold stays right on his hip, trailing the route, and as the ball arrives, was able to get it, the arm underneath McConkey's arm to the inside, knocks the pass away. You watch his feet in any of his workouts; they're so tremendous. You watched him during the gauntlet at the combine, supremely confident in his hands. He flew down the line, maintaining that speed, made it look effortless, plucking the ball out of the air. I look at Terrion Arnold, and I know the Raiders could obviously use a right tackle, but they also need a CB1. I think, as much as there's also the talk about the quarterback and Michael Penix Jr., look, you can get Penix later on in round number 1. I think you could also get a tackle on day 2 as well. You also have Thayer Munford, who filled in very well there at the right tackle spot. Luke Getsy, I know he wants to run the football, second in rush attempts in his offense a season ago. So yeah, he's going to want to probably bring in a guy like Taliese Fuaga. But when you think about that cornerback position, Amik Robertson signed in Detroit. You got Jack Jones there. Nate Hobbs showed some promise. Jacorian Bennett is coming along. They still don't have a CB1. Get Terrion Arnold in there to take care of one side. Because look, you've got to take on Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert twice. Quinyon Mitchell, I've got him going to Indy there at 15 overall. I like this fit. I think Jacksonville is another team that could be eyeing these two guys as well. Look, if the Raiders do end up going with Fuaga, then you just move the corners down to Indy and Jacksonville. But with Mitchell, I think that feels like a good fit because, look, they had 15 picks a season ago, but outside of Kenny Moore's 3 interceptions, only 2 others were made by corners. And I think what Chris Ballard is looking for is a playmaker there at that cornerback spot, and I think Quinyon Mitchell will be able to bring that. So who else is coming off the board in round 1? Well, I got 3 other guys for you. One of those is named Cooper DeJean out of Iowa, 6'5", 203. I think people are expecting maybe Nate Wiggins to come off the board before him, but the thing that I love about Cooper DeJean is the question's always asked, where's he going to play? Well, he can play anywhere you want to line him up. That's the beauty of this kid. He's just that versatile chess piece on the back end of the defense. I look at DeJean. I look at the Cardinals. Cardinals are sitting there at 27 overall, and DeJean could start with Murphy Bunting. He could end up going back and being that third safety as well with Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson as well. Breakout 2022 season opposite Riley Moss. 5 interceptions, 3 of those that he took back to the house. Broke up another 8 passes. Emphatic end to the season. Music City Bowl defensive MVP, 7 tackles, an interception, returned for a touchdown, returned 3 punts for 42 yards in the win over Kentucky. Key piece to the Hawkeye defense. Ultimately, he did have that injury. Broke his fibula in practice in November, which required surgery. But he's so instinctive. And the playmaking ability, you see that. He stays low on that back pedal, can stay on the hip of the receiver throughout the route. Does a great job locating the football, makes a play on it. And, he's not just looking to make a play on the ball, but he's looking to pluck it out of the air and take off. He's got that muscular build, so it does come with some tightness in those hips. So, he's not able to make a lot of those straight line plays. He's able to make the straight line plays, but he just struggles at times with some of those quick transitions. He's physical not only around the line of scrimmage, but also against the run. He can be physical against the receivers. His play does scream safety, but I think he could be effective as a zone corner as well. I think Arizona could be a team that could be interested in him. Green Bay is another one. Detroit. Yes, they've loaded up at corner, but I think they could always use another playmaker there on the back end of their defense. Be that third safety. I know they've got Brian Branch, but Branch could be their nickel. And then you've got, Ifeatu Melifonwu, you've got Kirby Joseph, and then you could throw DeJean in there as well. I actually have Nate Wiggins going ahead of him in my mock draft. And I actually have Nate Wiggins going to Green Bay at 25. And I mentioned that Cooper DeJean could end up being a guy going off there. Jair Alexander signed a 4-year, $84 million contract prior to the start of the 2022 season. Was a Pro Bowler that year. Injuries kept him to just 9 games. Missed another game due to a suspension. And then when he did play, Pro Football Focus had him the 99th in the league with a 73.5% catch rate. Eric Stokes, just played in 3 games due to a nagging hamstring injury. His catch rate was 73.3. He won't be an unrestricted free agent until after the 2025 season. But according to SpotTrack.com, letting him go this offseason carries a $2.65 million cap hit, would only account for $1.1 million in cap savings. So that's ultimately the question mark. Any dead cap for his release would drop to 0 after the end of the season, would save the team $12 million against the cap. So Stokes is going to stay on the roster, make or break season. You got Corey Ballantyne and Carrington Valentine. Valentine and Valentine. I think that's pretty funny. But pleasant surprises at depth pieces there. But I think they need another corner who can step up on the outside, be a playmaker, and Wiggins can absolutely do that. 3 interceptions, 2 of which were taken to the house, including a 98-yarder against Drake May in 2022. Broke up another 19 passes in his final 2 seasons at Clemson. And like Alexander, he ran a 4.38 and Stokes at a 4.29. Wiggins was also sub 4.4, running a 4.28 40. Incredibly fluid. Ability to flip those hips and turn and mirror receivers. Devontae Walker beat him with a vertical route as he was late to get his hands on Walker. Didn't turn quickly enough to run with Walker. Didn't get his head around. Already beaten for a 44-yard touchdown. So that's one of the things that could get himself into trouble. Doesn't always turn quickly enough. Doesn't always locate the football. He's excellent in off coverage. Could drive downhill in a hurry. The other thing that you worry about is the contested catches. 30.5-inch arms on the shorter side can limit that ability to make a play on the football, but the effort and recovery speed. I mentioned that Devontae Walker burned him, but against UNC, man, he chased down the running back Omarion Hampton off to the races on an outside zone run for 64 yards, and he chopped down on the ball, punched it free at the 1-yard line. Ball went through the end zone for a touchback. I think Wiggins could end up challenging Stokes for playing time and potentially end up taking over that job, and then really makes Stokes expendable at that point. Really pushes him into a make-or-break season there. San Francisco sitting there at number 31 overall. I love the Kool-Aid McKinstry pick, having McKinstry go there to the Niners. Kool-Aid McKinstry, look, man, he's kind of the forgotten guy in this draft class. He was the guy that everyone was talking about as the number 1 corner in this draft class, if you remember. He's an intelligent, pure cover corner on the outside, always seems to put himself in a position to make a play. He's strong in press coverage, stays square, patient before getting his hands on the receiver to slow up the release, smooth in his transitions, quickly turns, and he squeezes that receiver to the sideline. Does a great job there, not giving any room, forcing the quarterback to make a perfect throw. Also shows perfect tempo with the wideouts in and out of their breaks. Field awareness is exceptional. Does a great job reading the quarterback's eyes as well. Solid ball skills, attacking the catch point. Finished his career with 2 interceptions, 23 pass breakups. And look, he went up against top-end competition. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Adonai Mitchell, Lab McConkey, all guys that could end up being first-rounders in this year's draft. He went up against all of those guys. Dynamic as a punt returner, 11.9 yards per return, including a 15.8 yard per return average. Try to say that 3 times fast. That led the SEC in 2022. He can be handsy, especially down the field. Needs to trust that technique, not panic. If he wants to avoid those pass interference penalties, I think he also needs to become a better tackler. But look, there were questions about his speed. Ran a 4.47 at Alabama's Pro Day. Instinct, speed, athleticism, ball skills. I think he's a guy that could get there in San Francisco and compete to at least be that third corner with Shavarius Ward and Deommodore Lenoir. I think Lenoir can end up kicking to that nickel, and McKinstry can play with Ward there on the outside. But they did pick up Isaac Yiadom and Chase Lucas there as well. But it feels right here with San Francisco late in round number 1. The next guys that are coming off the list, we've got quite a few here in round number 2. Now the second round, we're looking at about 3-year average is 7, 5-year average is 8. In 2023, you're talking about Joey Porter Jr., looks like a stud for the Steelers. Juju Brents to the Colts, played well before he got injured. Brian Branch, safety, nickel now, pick 45 to the Lions. Quan Martin, from Illinois to the Commanders. Cam Smith out of South Carolina. Tyreek Stevenson, DJ Turner, all coming off the board in round number 2. A lot of depth in that draft class. 2022, you're looking at Roger McCreary, Jalen Petrie, who's a stud with the Texans, Kyler Gordon, Andrew Booth, Jaquan Brisker started there for the Bears. Alante Taylor has gotten a lot more playing time with the Saints. Cam Taylor-Britt looking like he could end up being a steal there with the Bengals, taking 60 overall. And then Brian Cook from Cincinnati going to the Chiefs at number 62 overall. 2021, Tyson Campbell. This is a guy that, the Jags, that's the reason why they're looking for a corner. They need to push Tyson Campbell for playing time. You got Javon Holland, starter with the Dolphins, Richie Grant, Trevon Merrick, a couple of safeties, starters. Kelvin Joseph just hasn't gotten things going with the Cowboys. You got Asante Samuel, another starter there in round number 2. You get to 2020, and you got another good group of guys. Xavier McKinney, Kyle Duggar, just got a new contract with the Patriots. Grant Delpit, Antoine Winfield. Are you serious? Antoine Winfield Jr., number 45 overall. How does he fall that far, right? But then you get into Jalen Johnson, stud for the Bears. Trevon Diggs, stud for the Cowboys, 50 and 51 overall. Then you get Christian Fulton and Jeremy Chin at the back end of round number 2. And then 2019, Byron Murphy to the Cardinals. You got Rock Ya-Sin, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Trayvon Mullen, Jawan Williams, Greedy Williams. Taylor Rapp was in that group, as was Juan Thornhill. So when you look at the second round, again, like I was saying, you're looking at about between 7 and 8. And when I look at this year's draft class, I actually got 8. Exactly 8. Look at that. The first guy on my list is Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri, 5'11", 183 pounds. And, with Rakestraw, this is one of those guys who I think could be a first rounder, but I think because of the depth at some of the other positions, I think he ends up falling to round 2. And 43 overall, I look at Atlanta. Atlanta finished with just 8 interceptions, tied for the third fewest. 6 of those interceptions came from their free safety, Jesse Bates III. A.J. Terrell is their leader there. Clark Phillips, D. Alford likely back. Mike Hughes still may be a cap casualty. I think they need another physical corner like Rakestraw. Makes sense on the outside for Jimmy Lake, the new D coordinator. Physical corner, not afraid to get up on the receiver, likes to get his hands on his man in front of him, make it hard to get off the line, will reroute, able to turn and run, doesn't allow much separation. Atlanta feels like a good fit, could be that running mate there for A.J. Terrell. Beyond him, I'm looking for some size. There's plenty of size in this year's draft class, and T.J. Tampa is one of those guys that I think he falls just outside, again, that group that's in round 1. I'm looking at the Commanders there at number 40 overall. T.J. Tampa, 6'1", 189, right? He just picked up Emmanuel Forbes with the 16th pick a season ago. Forbes struggled, 121.2 passer rating on passes against him, according to Pro Football Focus. Benjamin St. Just, 63.2% of passes, completion percentage thrown his way. They brought in Michael Davis to bring along these young guys. I think Dan Quinn needs to add another corner to push Forbes. And Quinn likes those big physical corners, and that's exactly what Tampa is. Pro Football Focus noted that last year Tampa allowed completions on 51% of the passes thrown his way, but he gave up just 1 touchdown. Quarterbacks ended with a 54.8 passer rating on passes against him in 2023. He's one of those guys, again, the physicality, I love it. And I think Washington, I look at Dan Quinn is going to want some physicality there on the outside. We have to wait until round number 2 to get our first safety. And I'm looking at Tyler Nubin. I think he's the guy that ends up getting the nod as that number 1 safety. And you got to love Tyler Nubin, an absolute ball hawk for the Golden Gophers, improving upon his interceptions each year, finished with 13 total interceptions, does a great job reading the quarterback's eyes, drives on the football in a hurry. DBs usually fixated on delivering the big hit, especially the big safeties. Newman's attacking the football. Not only can he play the deep safety on one play, but then he can line up in the box on the next, play downhill against the run. I'm looking at Green Bay. They brought in Xavier McKinney. You allow Tyler Newman to play with him. I think that'd be a nice safety duo on the back end. Tyler Newman, 6'1", 199. And when I look at Newman and what he did at the combine, he looked fluid, didn't run, but looked very fluid in the drills, looked pretty explosive. Second round feels about right for him. I'm looking at Max Melton out of Rutgers, 5'11", 187. I think teams slept on his brother, Bo, and I don't think they're going to do the same with Max. Max, 8 interceptions, broke up another 22 passes, can be physical at the line of scrimmage, fluid hips, ran a 4.39 40.5-inch vertical leap as well. He's physical coming down in run support. I'm looking at Philly. Philly needs to get younger at the cornerback position, first of all. You got Darius Slay and James Bradbury over the age of 30. They brought Avonte Maddox back as well. I think that Melton can push immediately for playing time at the nickel, if not potentially even kicking outside. One pick later, because I've got Philly at 50. One pick later, 51, the Steelers. And again, if the Steelers don't take a linebacker here, I'm looking at Mikey Sainristil, 5'9", 182. The thing with Sainristil is, the Steelers brought in Dante Jackson, this team with Joey Porter Jr. on the outside. I think they need to get somebody get that nickel and that workmanlike mentality, tough, gritty. That's exactly what Sainristil is. He's going to bring that mentality that Pittsburgh's really known for. He started his career as a receiver, brought those receiver instincts over to the DB position, and look, he trusts his eyes, drives quickly on the football in both off coverage or in zone. He's willing to come up and be physical and press coverage as well. He can be a terror in the run game, flies downhill, 7 interceptions, including 6 last year, 13 pass breakups over the last 2 seasons. Proof he has the ball skills to be a playmaker in the secondary. Was also a leader on Michigan's defense a season ago, so you're getting a high character player. That's something that I think Mike Tomlin's absolutely looking for. Kamari Lassiter is one of those corners who could end up being a steal. The thing with Kamari Lassiter is, he doesn't overwhelm you in some of the workouts, and he shows up at the combine and didn't run. 5'11", 186. He looks pretty fluid as he works out. When you look at it, he managed just 1 interception, 14 pass breakups in his 3 seasons at Georgia. Can he be a playmaker is the question. But look, teams didn't really want to throw his way. They were targeting a lot of other guys in that offense. He gave up just 136 pass yards, which was the fewest among corners, with at least 350 coverage snaps, 38.5% completion percentage, second lowest according to Pro Football Focus as well. He's a pure cover corner. That's really the big thing that you're going to see. He mirrors well, doesn't give up a whole lot of ground. Hips are fluid in his, with those transitions. You see the instincts as well to drive on the football. I think he could be a lockdown corner. It's one of those things to where he didn't wow you with his athleticism, but his play speed is a heck of a lot faster. I look at Houston, 59 overall. Nick Caserio wants to, wheel and deal. He's been doing a lot of that. He needs a cornerback opposite Derek Stingley. He's gone with a lot of low-risk, high-reward options like Jeff Okudah, C.J. Henderson, Lonnie Johnson, Mike Ford, all of whom signed 1-year deals, right? But will any of these veterans be a long-term option? I don't know. These guys outside of this year, there's no guarantees. You bring in a guy like Kamari Lassiter, and Kamari Lassiter can learn from these guys and end up taking over the reins in 2025. For the second safety coming off the board I actually have is Cole Bishop out of Utah, 6'2", 206. You're going to say, where is Cam Kinchins? I've got Cam Kinchins sliding just a little bit. He's a playmaker. We'll get to him in just a second. But with Cole Bishop, I look at the Bills. This guy just feels like a Bills guy. They lose Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. They held down those safety spots since 2017. It's crazy. They're both gone. So they re-signed Taylor Rapp and bring in Mike Edwards. Get the first crack at the starting spots. They need an infusion of youth. Come on. Bishop started 29 and 35 games. Range to make plays over the top against the pass, takes the proper angle to wrap up ball carriers, trying to get to the perimeter. burst downhill as well, playing in the box, making plays behind the line of scrimmage. 197 tackles, 21.5 going for loss, 7.5 sacks, 3 interceptions, a forced fumble, and 4 fumble recoveries in his 3 seasons with the Utes. Not only does he have a nose for the football, but he's fluid in coverage. You saw it at the Senior Bowl, repeatedly locked up tight ends, forced incompletions. Then he runs the 4.45 40, 39-inch vertical leap. He was a sleeper at one point, but sleeper no more. Everybody knows who Cole Bishop is. That's a guy that a lot of people are targeting, and he's a guy to me that makes a lot of sense there in round number 2. And I just realized, let's see, I don't actually. There we go. Number 48 overall, Jacksonville, going with Renardo Green out of Florida State. If Jacksonville goes receiver in the first round, which I have a feeling they might, then Renardo Green sitting there, 48 overall, makes a lot of sense. Tyson Campbell needs to be pushed for that starting spot opposite Ronald Darby. Does well in press coverage, shows the ability to stick like glue to the wide out off the line. Good job getting his head around to locate the football. Solid ball skills. 13 pass breakups a season ago that led the ACC, was in the top 10 in the FBS. 6 foot 186. He has good size, has good range, and it just feels like a good spot there for Renardo Green. Ran a 4.49 40 at the combine, 37.5-inch vertical leap, 10.10 in his broad jump as well. So yeah, this is a guy that makes a lot of sense. When we look at round number 3, we've averaged right around between 7 and 8. In 2021, that was the high with 10. We saw just 5 in 2019. When we look at round 3, the big names that jump out, Sidney Brown, Garrett Williams, guys that are hopefully going to get some playing time there with the Eagles and Cardinals. Riley Moss, Jair Brown, starter there for the 49ers, started in the Super Bowl. You got Mekhi Blackman, who had a good year there with the Vikings. Jacorian Bennett looks like a keeper for the Raiders. But Jacorian Bennett was in the 4th round, excuse me. You get to round number 3 in 2022. That's where Martin Emerson, a starter for the Browns. Marcus Jones played pretty well there with the Patriots. And then Kirby Joseph to the Lions. Kirby Joseph, obviously a starter as well. You've got Andre Sisco of the Jags. Benjamin St. Just, who we just talked about, going to the Commanders at 74 overall. Paulson Adebo to the Saints, number 76 overall. So you've got some playmakers already here in this 2021 class in round number 3. Continuing along this route, Divine Diablo to the Raiders as a safety, ends up becoming a linebacker. Lions, look, they also get Ifeatu Melifonwu in 2021 at 101 overall. You continue down to the 2020 draft. You look at round number 3 there, and Brandon Jones to the Dolphins. Julian Blackman got re-signed there with the Colts. I think it was a 1-year deal. 2019, Jamel Dean is the name that really jumps out. And then Mike Edwards. We just talked about Mike Edwards being brought in there with the Bills. He was drafted by the Bucs. Look, the Bucs took 2 safeties. Took a corner and a safety in that 2019 draft. Jamel Dean, 94 overall. Mike Edwards there at number 99 overall, really addressing the secondary there, were the Bucs. I've got 9 guys potentially coming off the board in round number 3, and it all starts with Cam Kinchens. And look, Cam Kinchens could easily be a second rounder. Some people have him as their number 1 safety, 5'11", 206. That 40 time, 4.65 was slowest among all the DBs. And, you turn on the film and you see a ball hawk. 11 interceptions, 15 pass breakups, ends up running a 4.57 40 at his pro day. You think about this. Trevon Merrick, similar production at TCU. 7 interceptions, 21 pass breakups, ran a 4.52 40 at the 2021 Combine, was the Raiders' 43 overall pick. What if the Raiders target Cam Kinchens to eventually replace Marcus Epps at that other safety spot? I think that makes a heck of a lot of sense. Again, if the Raiders trade back into round 1 to get Michael Penix Jr., that may go away. I look at my mock. I've got Ben Sinnott in round number 3. I may have to adjust things because Kinchens and Sinnott are probably coming off the board in round 2. Let's be perfectly honest. But right now I've got him going off the board in round number 3. And after that, things really start to get interesting. I've got DJ James out of Auburn, 6 foot 173. I've got him going to the Lions. And what you got with DJ is, he's long, he's lanky, 4'4", 240, fluid hips, transitions at the top of the route, turn and run with the receivers down the sideline. Good job putting himself in a position to make a play on the football. Not the most physical corner, but the ball skills are evident. Good job driving on the football to make a play at the catch point. Lions, they traded for Carlton Davis. They signed Amik Robertson, brought back Emmanuel Mosley, but I think they need another corner now that Cameron Sutton's no longer on the roster. That makes a lot of sense there. We continue moving with that cornerback spot. Chris Abrams-Drain out of Missouri, 5'11", 179. Look at KC at number 95 overall. Chiefs traded L'Jarius Sneed to Tennessee. They've got Trent McDuffie, can lock his man down. They've got Jalen Watson. Joshua Williams could use a push for playing time. And I look at Chris Abrams-Drain. Is he just a nickel? I think he can play on the outside a little bit as well. That's what he did there at Missouri. Began his career as a receiver. And again, you see those receiver skills as well. Fluid, mirrors well, excellent ball skills, 7 interceptions, 34 pass breakups in his career there at Mizzou. Really good reps against expected top 10 wideout. Malik Neighbors down the field, maintain that inside leverage, squeezing Neighbors to the inside, to the sideline, taking away any chance at a completion down the field. Highly competitive. I just think he and McDuffie, you team the two of those guys together, and I think the Chiefs would really have something. 97 overall, I've got the Bengals taking Kyrie Jackson. He's 6'4", 194, length for days. Cincinnati, that Duke Tobin's going to take a corner. He's not afraid to take a cornerback early. I think we've learned that from him. They've got Mike Hilton, Cam Taylor-Britt, up and down season after a solid rookie year. DJ Turner struggled, but they lose Chidobe Awuzie. They need another corner for sure. And with Kyrie Jackson, limited starting experience, only 14 starts to his credit, but excellent size, excellent strength. He's not the most fluid with his transitions, but he's incredibly physical, a beast with contested catches. Attacks that catch point, using that length to make a play on the football. He's not afraid to come up and run support either. Can be physical when you want him to be. So I think that's another thing that stands out when I watch him play. You look at Nehemiah Pritchett out of Auburn. I think Nehemiah is another guy that needs to be on teams' radars in round number 3. I think my mock right now actually has him coming off the board in round 4, but I think Nehemiah Pritchett is a guy that can come off the board in round number 3. And when we look at him, I look at Minnesota. Byron Murphy emerged as the team's top corner. They've got a Caleb Evans, started 15 games. You got Mekhi Blackman, who was a solid rookie campaign as well. They need one more corner to really drive things home. Pritchett's versatile, played multiple positions at Auburn, known for the ball skills, 3 interceptions, 24 pass breakups. He's 6 foot, 190 pounds, and looked pretty fluid at the combine as well. Ran a 4.36 40, 1.49 10-yard split. So he's got that explosiveness to his game there as well. There's a lot to like with Nehemiah Pritchett. Safeties. I got a bunch of safeties coming off the board in round number 3, and you think of Dadrian Taylor Demerson out of Texas Tech, 5'10", 197. You watched him there at the East-West Shrine game, and you just saw his ability to cover. Just covering guys, made it look easy. He's got the long speed, 4'4", 140, fluid hips to turn and run with the receiver. Can handle the suddenness on those underneath routes, can hang with the vertical routes. 7 interceptions, 13 pass breakups in his 2 seasons there at Texas Tech. I look at Houston, and they got Jalen Petrie and Jimmy Ward. Ultimately, I think you can ultimately have him take over for him. You look at MJ Stewart and Eric Murray. They're in contract years along with Ward. I think Houston, they're going to look to add depth now, and they're also going to look to the future of that position. And I think Dadrian Taylor Demerson can absolutely be that guy. Kalen Bullock out of USC. 6'2", 188, was a 3-year starter for the Trojans, showcased his ability to cover a hell of a lot of ground on the back end of the defense. I was actually at the game in 2022 against Cal at the Coliseum. He lined up on the right hash, And as the Cal quarterback threw a go route down the sideline, the left sideline, Bullock covers a ton of ground to not only get over the top of the route, but then all the way to the other side of the field, plucks the ball out of the air for the pick, finished with 9 interceptions, 2 of which he returned for touchdown, and 15 pass breakups. Seemed to struggle this year against the run, seemed to be out of position at times with missed tackles. It's unclear really though how much of that was the defensive scheme there at UCLA, because it was historically bad, but it's clear he's better suited in coverage. At the combine, looks so smooth, especially with the transitions that you heard Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis on the broadcast talking about, hey, there's a possibility that this guy could be used as a corner. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. And I'm looking at the Rams. They've got Darion Kendrick, Kobe Turner, Trey Tomlinson. If any of those guys falter, Bullock could end up playing corner. I think he could be an upgrade over Russ Yeast at that safety position. He'll team with Cameron Curl, who the aforementioned Cameron Curl, who was a 7th round pick of the Washington Commanders. But I look at Kalen Bullock, and could he come off the board in round 2? There's a possibility, but I think round 3 feels right, and I think the Rams would be a perfect fit. Keep him there in LA. And then I look at Javon Bullard out of Georgia, 5'10", 198 pounds. And look, Antoine Winfield, all-pro level in 2023. Ryan Neal's a free agent. Jordan Whitehead was signed as his replacement, but I think the Bucs could use a player like Bullard with his range over the top. He's physical against the run in the box, can also cover both tight ends and slot receivers. I think he can act as a third safety, or better yet, even challenge Tavir Thomas as the team's starting nickel, because he has that cover ability as well. Known as a big hitter, will bring another level of physicality to the Bucs secondary. I feel like that's a good spot there for him. And then one last name that I think could end up coming off the board here in round number 3, and that's Jalen Simpson. Simpson to Baltimore just feels like the right fit. You have Kyle Hamilton at one spot, made his first Pro Bowl, but free safety Marcus Williams battled injuries for the 2nd straight season since signing that 5-year deal prior to the 2022 year. Geno Stone was his backup, started 11 games, picked off 7 passes. Now he's gone in free agency. Simpson, experience in both corner and safety, good range over the top, covering the slot. Hips are a little tight. Didn't make the biggest impact against the run, but 7 interceptions, 14 pass breakups in his career with the Tigers. He's one of those guys that I feel can find his way on the field in a variety of ways there in Baltimore. So that would be it for round number 3, which takes us to the 4th round. And again, you look at this 4th round, it just continues. The depth continues to go, right? 3-year average, you're looking at 7. 5-year average was 8, so we're kind of right in between there with this group. And if we look at the last 5 years, that's where Jacorian Bennett comes into play. Clark Phillips a season ago. You get into the 2022 season, Kobe Bryant, Percy Butler, Caleb Evans. We just talked about him, and Jack Johnson as well. Joshua Williams, Kobe Durant, a lot of guys that we've talked about. 2021, you get into Robert Rochelle, Marco Wilson. 2020, you're looking at L'Jarius Sneed at 138, and then Amik Robertson, 139. A couple of guys that found new homes in free agency. One was traded, but you get the picture. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, 105 overall. So 4th round, and then Amani Hooker, safety linebacker, kind of that tweener guy going to the Titans. He's still a starter there. So 4th round, you can absolutely find a starter at that group. I look at Jaden Hicks out of Washington State. Big physical dude on the back end of the defense. He could be like a nickel linebacker, and he's a guy that I think could end up even coming off the board in round number 3. I just started running out of spots for defensive backs, and so that's ultimately why I had him coming off the board in round number 4. I look at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh feels like a good fit. Have him team with Minkah Fitzpatrick. I know that Deshaun Elliott was brought in, but Hicks could. That feels like it could be the right spot. He can play in the box. He can handle man coverage, especially lining up against the tight ends. Good ball skills as well. 6'2", 213 pounds. Big dude for sure. Kalen Carson out of Wake Forest, 6', 199. The biggest thing with Kalen Carson is just staying healthy. When he's on the field, he's money. I look at Baltimore. I think Baltimore could use another corner. They got Marlon Humphrey. They got Brandon Stevens. I think ultimately adding a third corner to the mix to challenge Arthur Mollet, that makes a lot of sense. He's a sticky corner. Great job mirroring receivers. Doesn't allow a whole lot of separation. If you watched him against Quinyon Coleman this past year, he wasn't afraid to be physical with the bigger receiver. Made it difficult for him to create any separation. There was a fade where he just showed that grittiness. Didn't allow any separation. Coleman tried to elevate over Carson, able to get a hand in and break it up. You love the physicality and his ability to continue to make a play, not give up on it. And I look at Elijah Jones from Boston College, 6'1", 185. This is a guy with ball skills, and he's a guy again that should be rising up draft boards. Could end up coming off the board earlier than this pick. If he falls to round number 4, I'm looking at 105 overall with the Chargers. They lost Michael Davis. They brought in Christian Fulton to play opposite Asante Samuel, but his play has been underwhelming over the past 2 seasons. He'll provide depth, but I think you look at Elijah Jones, 7 interceptions, 21 pass breakups in the last 2 seasons. Really came into his own. Solid in press coverage, ability to reroute receivers off the line, fluid enough to mirror through the transitions as well. I think he has a chance to be a starter at the next level, be a good one. Malik Mustafa out of Wake Forest, safety, 5'11", 209. This dude can come up and hit you. He's an athletic freak. And for sure, this guy, 41.5-inch vertical leap, ran a 4.5 240. Just tremendously strong. 1,300-pound lifter with bench press, squat, deadlift. 15 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, and 4 forced fumbles. Definitely a guy that's flying under the radar. He'll give you a big hit, drive through the ball carrier, a physical presence, like I said, in the ground game, but then he also is a guy on the back end of the defense that does a great job roaming in that space. I look at the Jets. Jordan White left in free agency. Chuck Clark was brought in on a 1-year deal to kind of replace him opposite Tony Adams, who's also in a contract year after picking off 3 passes a season ago. I think they can consider another safety in round number 4, and I'm looking at Mustafa. I think that'd be a great fit for him. I think Andrew Phillips, of Kentucky, 5'11", 190. He's a feisty corner on the outside, and I'm looking at the Niners, who could potentially double dip at that cornerback spot. Ambry Thomas just didn't really pan out. So I think that's where you can potentially see him come off the board there. Ran a 4.48 40 at the combine, 42-inch vertical leap as well. I look at Cam Hart at Notre Dame, 6'3", 202. This is another guy who could potentially come off the board on day 2 because he has tremendous size. I'm looking at Seattle, 22nd in the league in passing yards given up. Devin Witherspoon, finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year. Tariq Woolen really failed to build upon that 2022 performance that got him selected to the Pro Bowl. Injuries slowed him up, gave up 4 touchdowns, committed 9 penalties according to Pro Football Focus, struggled with tackling. He was benched in favor of Michael Jackson. When you look at this, Jackson and Artie Burns are in the final year of their deals. Kobe Bryant's better served as a safety. Get Hart in there, use that length. The ability to mirror, which was what was surprising at the Senior Bowl, because he's known really for that physicality and press coverage. Can also come downhill and make plays against the run. And then Jerrion Jones out of Florida State. This is a guy I've been flirting with, moving him into round 5, possibly in round 4. 6 foot, 190 pounds. Another guy with some versatility. And when I look at Jerrion Jones, he was the guy, kind of the forgotten guy because everyone wanted to talk about Renardo Green. But I think Houston could potentially double dip with that cornerback spot because they've got Stingley, they've got Desmond King, Jeff Okudah, CJ Henderson, Lonnie Johnson, Miles Bryant, but anybody that's not named Derek Stingley is a free agent at season's end. So that's why I think they're going to double dip here. He's got size and athleticism to either play on the outside or in the slot. Great job anticipating throws, drives on the ball quickly. So that's kind of where I'm at with round number 4. In round 5, I got a bunch of dudes coming off the board in round 5. I got 10 in round 5. We had 11 this last year. In 2021, we had 15. So the 3-year average is 11. So I'm right in that wheelhouse. And this is where I think you look at Chaw Smith-Wade. There are some that think that he may come off the board a lot sooner than this, and that's entirely possible. But this is a dude who is he's athletic. He excels in press coverage. I think he's a guy that we could see come off the board to the Patriots. They got Christian Gonzalez, Marcus Jones, Isaiah Bolden. Jonathan Jones, 30 years of age, starting opposite Gonzalez. I think the Patriots could end up getting another corner to add to that group. Potentially challenge Jones for some playing time there. Smith-Wade, I think, would be a nice pickup there towards the top of round number 5. Tyke Smith and Bo Braid, the safeties out of Georgia and Maryland, are 2 other guys that I think will come off the board in that round 5 range. With Tyke Smith, he's got the versatility to play, on the back end. He can cover as well, can line up in nickel, does a little bit of everything, can also line up in the box against the run, 5'10", 202. And then, as I mentioned with Bo Braid, I've got him a little bit further down on the list, but can be a physical presence. I mentioned the Lions quite a bit, safety spot. 6', 203 is Bo Braid. They got Kirby Joseph, Ifeatu Melifonwu, and Brian Branch. If they don't target another safety, I think Braid would be a physical defender, could play in the box, play right around that line of scrimmage, can line up as a dual safety as well. 9.5 career tackles for loss. I don't think he'll ever be a starter, but I think he'd end up being that third safety in that group with Joseph and Melifonwu, with Branch as the nickel. That feels like that might be the right spot for him. Kalen King out of Penn State, 5'11", 191. Look, Kalen King, I think there was a lot of hype around King, and in 2022, I think that's really he 3 interceptions, 18 pass breakups, but then he started struggling, and the Senior Bowl brought cause for concern. I think that's really what brought his stock just plummeting. But if he can return to that 2022 form, he can end up being a steal. I look at the Rams, at that cornerback spot I talked about, Kendrick, Durant, and Trey Tomlinson. That trio, what happens there? You look at White, Tre'Davious White, and Darius Williams there, really kind of revamping the starting spot there. They've got Quentin Lake. I think when you look at Kalen King, he can play corner on the outside. He can line up in nickel. He can be a safety as well. Just a versatile piece for the Rams. If they're not happy with Kendrick, Durant, or Tomlinson, I think they need to have some competition there on the back end of that defense. Quantez Stiggers, the Toledo Argonauts. This dude, what a story. One of his brothers almost left as a quadriplegic after a spinal cord accident playing football. But then his father was involved in a serious car accident in 2020. He was a freshman at Lane College in Tennessee at the time. Ultimately had to leave school, and just tragic situation there with his family. And he ultimately tried out for the fan-controlled football league. It's kind of a live streaming league there, and 2022 season ends up getting the attention of the Toronto Argonauts playing there, and shows up there at the CFL. 53 tackles, 3 special teams tackles as well, 5 interceptions, and ends up as the CFL's most outstanding rookie, and was an all-star. And he goes to the East-West Shrine Bowl, showed up really well there, and when you're talking about 5 interceptions, in his first year in the CFL, after not playing college football and just played in the fan control football league, come on. 6 foot, 197 pounds. He's a guy that can end up coming off the board even sooner than that. I just think that, you look at the Falcons, you look at the 49ers, there are a lot of teams, Cincinnati, a lot of teams are interested in him. I think it's a great story. He's going to be a lot of fun to keep an eye on, keep tabs on as his career progresses. I look at Dwight McGlothern, a guy that people didn't really give a whole lot of credit to. 6'2", 185, ran a 4.47 40 at the combine. 8 interceptions, 23 pass breakups in his career, excels in zone coverage. I look at the Bills, 70% of the time they ran a zone coverage. I think he'd be an interesting fit there because, look, they've got Rasul Douglas, they've got Kyer Elam, they've got Christian Benford. Depth a concern, especially with Tre'Davious White and Dane Jackson leaving. I think round 5 is not out of the realm of possibility for Dwight McGlothern. Marcellus Dial out of South Carolina, 6'1", 190. He's a day 3 guy. Couldn't really figure out exactly where to put Marcellus Dial in this discussion, but round 5 is a possibility. 6', 190, 3 interceptions, 28 pass breakups. Ball skills definitely evident there with Marcellus Dial. And South Carolina produces a lot of really good corners. And this is a guy, 4.46 40, 40.5-inch vertical leap, really a good athlete. Jarvis Brownlee of Louisville, 5'10", 194. He's a feisty corner there on the outside. He's a lot of fun to watch. Jalen Carlisle of Missouri and Ketan Oladapo, 2 big corners. Jalen Carlisle can end up, he's 6'3", 227. He could be this year's Divine Diablo, potentially, a guy that can move over and be that linebacker. Ran a 4.5 40, put up 225 20 times. A little bit of stiffness to his game, which is why he may move to that linebacker spot. And then Ketan Oladapo out of Oregon State, a leader on the back end of their defense, 6'2", 216. Another guy that has some stiffness to his game, but look, ran a 4.58 40. Not overly explosive, and that's where I think there is some concern there with Oladapo. But look, again, team captain, versatile piece on the back end of their defense, played in the box, 15 tackles for loss and 6 sacks in his career. Also, 3 interceptions and 23 pass breakups. I look at Carolina. They brought in Jordan Fuller and Nick Scott to take that free safety spot opposite Xavier Woods. Nobody is going to be under contract beyond this season, so I think Carolina could draft another safety to round out the depth with Jamie Robinson, potentially end up taking over a starting spot as early as next year. So Oladapo, I think, could potentially fill in that role. And if you're asking where did I have Carlisle going, I'm looking at the Giants. I think get a safety to challenge Jalen Mills and Jason Pinnock, but a guy that could also be that linebacker, and especially if they go for a 3 linebacker set. Carlisle can potentially be that guy that slides in there. 9 interceptions, 9 pass breakups in his career. Also finished with not only 220 tackles, 11.5 tackles for loss, including 4 tackles for loss in each of the last 2 seasons. So Carlisle, to me, is a guy that teams should be keeping an eye on there in round number 5. We look at round 6. I've got 7 guys penciled in for round 6. Round 6, you're looking at about 9 to 10 guys coming off the board. Round 5, I know that the podcast is getting a little long, so we'll shorten some things up. Antonio Johnson from Texas A&M going to the Jags in this past year's draft. Zion McCollum, a guy that's going to get a lot more playing time there with the Bucs. Deron Bland ended up being a stud from Fresno State to the Cowboys at 167 overall. Christian Benford, he's round 6. And I'm sorry, Zion McCollum was 5th round. Tariq Woolen was 5th round. 6th round that year. You're looking at Darion Kendrick, Quentin Lake, a couple of Rams. They took them back-to-back picks. You get into 2021, and since we didn't talk about round 5 a whole lot, there's Derek Forrest in round 5. Diamador Lenore came off the board there. Jason Pinnock as well. Round 6 is Damar Hamlin was taken in that round. Jacoby Stevens. Israel Bukuamu has gotten some playing time there with the Cowboys. You get to 2020, round 6. You're looking at really, Jordan Fuller is probably the guy that stands out in my mind for that year. And then you get to 2019, and round 6, you're really targeting, maybe Jaquan Johnson, Marcus Epps, are guys, Duke Shelley, Donovan Wilson. Those were all round 6 guys. For me this year, when I'm looking at round 6, I look at Evan Williams of Oregon, 5'11", 200 pounds. Physical guy, can play around the line of scrimmage. You watched him at the combine, going through the gauntlet. Very confident in his hands. I look at James Williams out of Miami, 6'4", 231. Is he a linebacker? Is he a safety? There's some stiffness to his game. I think he may end up playing linebacker at the next level. You got Johnny Dixon out of Penn State, 5'11", 188. There's some who think he may have come off the board as early as round number 4. I just, there was something about his game that I can't quite put my finger on it. 3 interceptions, 15 pass breakups. He was just one of those guys that I didn't think was dynamic enough as a playmaker there on the outside, and that's really what worried me. He also has really short arms, so that's the other thing that I worry about at the next level against some of the bigger receivers. Dominic Hampton, Washington, 6'2", 215. This dude was a leader on the back end of that defense, and I look at Dominic, and he's one of those guys that could come off the board a lot sooner, right? I mean, he's 109 tackles this past season, 14 pass breakups, a couple of interceptions this past year, but the leadership, that's really the big thing that I would say, about his game. But he's physical, he's intelligent. DeCameron Richardson of Mississippi State, another guy that's 6'2", 188 pounds, another really big corner. And that's something that I think teams are going to be looking for to try to deal with some of these bigger receivers. 10 pass breakups in his career. He's a guy, round 6, round 7. That's really kind of the debate with some of these guys. But look, he ran a 4.3, 4.40 with a 1.48 10-yard split at 6'2". Decent length to him. So he's one of those guys that I think teams are going to want to target there in that round 6 range. It needs to be more productive, I think, on the outside. You look at Miles Harden of South Dakota. There's some that love him as well. 5'11", 195. I thought he looked solid at the combine. Ran a 4.5 40, 3.98 in the short shuttle, which was the fastest among all the DBs. Really a guy that could change directions well. Something that really stood out to me when I was watching some of his film as well is his ability to transition so quickly. I look at MJ Devonshire out of Pittsburgh, 5'11", 186. He's another guy, he's a good athlete. This is a guy that always seemed to be around the football. And that's why I continue to look at him and say, he's a guy that I think at the next level could end up being a playmaker. 8 interceptions, 23 pass breakups in his career. And then he shows up at the combine and runs a 4.4 640. 4.45. Don't want to shortchange him there. And so he's one of those guys that I think, the ball skills teams are going to be looking for here on the back end of round number 6. You get into round number 7, and you're looking at, there were 11 this past year. Round 7 guys, I mentioned, a few names. How about DeMarco Hellams, starter there for the Falcons? Carrington Valentine, Isaiah Bolden, still there with the Patriots, coming out of Jackson State. Got good size to him there. 2022, Dean Leonard, is a guy that's kind of bounced around a little bit. Chase Lucas as well. Russ Yeast, 253 overall, and right now he's slotted as a starter for the Rams. You get into 2020, and I think maybe Trey Norwood is probably the guy to look at there in that year's draft. 2020, there were a ton of guys, and I mentioned it earlier. Cam Curl, Geno Stone, and Dane Jackson, all taken at 216, 219, and 239. So, yeah, you can't find guys on the back end of this draft. And then you get into round 7 of 2019. Jimmy Moreland is probably the guy that jumps out to me, and then Nick Scott as well. Moreland had some really good years there in Washington. Nick Scott's bounced around a little bit, has been a starter at a couple of different franchises. When I look at this group, I look at a couple of Mississippi guys. DeAndre Prince, the corner. Dijon Anthony, the safety. They're both 6 foot. Prince is probably about 12 pounds lighter than Anthony, who's 6 foot at 195. Anthony's going to be your physical safety. Has good range. DeAndre Prince he's fast, man. This dude ran a 4.38 40, a 1.47 10-yard split. And when I think of DeAndre Prince, not only is speed there, but the ball skills, right? 6 interceptions, 21 pass breakups in his career with the Rebels. So those are two guys that I see coming off the board in round 7. There are some people that have them slotted much higher, which I completely understand. Kamal Haddon at Tennessee at 6'1", 196, was a veteran leader there on the back end of the defense there with the Vols in Tennessee. 6 interceptions, 12 pass breakups in 3 seasons there at Tennessee. Physical player, physical presence there at the cornerback position. I look at Mark Perry out of TCU, a safety, a guy that wasn't invited to the combine, but definitely stepped his game up. Started at Colorado, shows up there at TCU. This is a guy 15.5 tackles for loss. A guy that likes to play behind the line of scrimmage, has some ball skills as well. 3 interceptions, 10 pass breakups. A guy that can get down the field. You see some ball skills. A guy that can recover a little bit down the field. Damani Richardson of Texas A&M at 6'1", 210. Another guy who's very physical. He's been on my radar for a couple of years. I think he can come off the board much sooner. You look at it, 304 tackles with the Aggies, 15.5 going for loss, 4 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, 4 forced fumbles in his career as well. Ran a 4.6 40, so didn't showcase a whole lot of athleticism. That's really why I think he falls to round 7. But I think his ability to make plays both in the box and on the back end of the defense is why he still ends up getting drafted there in round 7. Jarius Monroe out of Marshall, another guy that wasn't invited to the combine, but a guy that I was a huge fan of. And I said Marshall, but it's actually Tulane. 97 tackles in his 2 years there in New Orleans with the Green Wave. 6 interceptions, 18 pass breakups. I love the length to his game, and he's a guy that is fearless on the outside. I think he's a guy that can end up sticking with a franchise for sure. Daquan Hardy at Penn State. 3 corners from Penn State getting drafted. But you think of Daquan Hardy, he's the slot guy. 5'9", 179 pounds. Again, not the biggest guy by any means, but 5 interceptions, 19 pass breakups. A guy that can play around the line of scrimmage a little bit. 7.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks in his career. He's small, but he's explosive. 4.38 40, 42.5-inch vertical leap. He's the guy that can end up coming off the board a lot sooner as well. Josh Newton out of TCU, 5'11", 190. Josh Newton, this was a guy that I think everybody was hyping up as one of the lockdown corners, right? And he shows up from Louisiana Monroe to TCU, has a big year there, 3 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, returned 1 to the house for 6. And then I thought he struggled a little bit in 2023. Didn't really end up on people's radar, and I think that's kind of hurt him a little bit, hurt that draft stock. And he's a guy that I think is primarily just a zone guy. Don't really ask him to be impressed man. Really, kind of that off coverage as well. I worry about a little bit. I think he's mostly a zone guy. Allow him to take advantage of reading the play in front of him and driving on the football. Miller Bradford at TCU, 5'11", 191, another TCU Horned Frog. They got 3 guys that could potentially get drafted. When you think of Miller Bradford, that's you probably saw Nook Bradford on the roster, but this is a guy. Look, he's not the biggest dude by any means, 5'11", 187, but 16.5 tackles for loss in his career. 4 interceptions, 15 pass breakups. This guy can play all over the field for you, and he could come off the board much sooner than round 7. That's where I have him penciled in right now. But I look at some of the other safeties. Should he come off the board ahead of a few of these guys? I think it's entirely possible. He's just a guy that can do a little bit of everything. On the field, can play in a lot of different roles, and so he's made a lot of visits to teams. I think there's a lot of interest in him, so he's a guy that can come off the board I think a little bit sooner than round number 7. Sione Vaki out of Utah, 5'11", 210. This is a guy, not the most explosive guy, by any means, but he's physical, just has a nose for the football. He's just a physical presence on the back end of the defense. Had 8.5 tackles for loss this past season at Utah. But a guy that also played running back for them. He's a guy that's still learning that safety spot. He's only a redshirt sophomore, so I wish he would have come back for another year. 4.62 40, but a 39.5-inch vertical leap. Put up 225 20 times. You're not really sure exactly what you're getting. You know that he's a tough, hard-nosed football player, but at that safety position, can he really develop into a full-time role at the next level? I think if anything, he'd be one of those special teams guys. Beanie Bishop out of West Virginia, the corner. What I like about Beanie is he's got ball skills for days. The problem with Beanie is the dude needs to hold on to the freaking football. I don't know how many times he dropped passes that were right in his hands, right? He started his career at Western Kentucky, was there for 4 years, then travels to Minnesota, and he had 3 interceptions at Western Kentucky, just 8 pass breakups. Minnesota, wasn't a starter, didn't see the football thrown his way a ton, but then he shows up at West Virginia and just absolutely balls out for them. 4 interceptions, 20 pass breakups, and like I said, with those 20 pass breakups, had he held on to the freaking football, he would have had even more interceptions than what he had. But he's 5'10", 175 pounds. You just love the competitive nature. You love his ability to make plays on the football, even if he's dropping some of them. He's one of those guys that I think teams will target there towards the end of the draft, just because he's always around the football. And then one final guy that I need to throw out there is Tory Taylor out of Air Force. 6 foot, 205, Jim Thorpe Award winner. Why? Well, 74 tackles, 5 going for loss, 3 interceptions, 4 pass breakups. One of those interceptions he took back to the house. Heat-seeking missile, flies around and makes plays. On the back end of the defense there for the Falcons. He's got that 2-year military requirement, but there's a reason why he was a Jim Thorpe Award winner. I would have loved to have seen him, at the combine. I thought he deserved that. Get some of that additional exposure, but if you watch the game film, there's a reason, again, why he was the Jim Thorpe Award winner. Just always seemed to be around making plays there for Air Force. Other guys to be mindful of, I think Ryan Cooper of Oregon State. Is he a corner? Is he a safety? He's versatile enough to play a couple of different positions. Carlton Johnson, 5'11", 173 there out of Fresno State's another guy. Good ball skills. Tyler Owens of Texas Tech at 6'2", 216. Explosive athlete. I think that's one thing that we can definitely say with him. He had a 41-inch vertical leap and the broad jump of 12 feet 2 inches. Which is staggering. 33 and 3/8-inch arms. So he's got some longer arms there on the back end of the defense, but the production just doesn't really match the athleticism. That's why I think he'd be a perfect priority free agent. Is somebody going to draft him? They probably will because of all of that athleticism, but didn't really play at Texas in his first 3 years. Then he gets to Texas Tech, just 10 games this past season, 37 tackles, just a couple of pass breakups. You're really kind of throwing out as that potential. I just don't think he's ready for the next level. I think he's one of those guys that you're going to have to put on the practice squad, and for that reason, I've got him as an undrafted free agent. Let's see. Who else? Christian Roland Wallace is a physical presence there at corner. Started his career at Arizona, finished it at USC, 5'11", 201. Rode Torrance of Arizona State has good length at 6'3", 208. Tarheeb Still of Maryland, Josh Wallace of Michigan are a couple of corners, and Andre Sam is a versatile safety there out of LSU. Also guys to keep an eye on. One last guy that I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, it's Kenny Logan out of Kansas, a guy that I don't think has gotten a whole lot of publicity, but 6 foot 195, 383 tackles. This was a dude who had back-to-back years in 2021 and 2022 with over 100 tackles. 13.5 tackles for loss, 6 interceptions, 20 pass breakups, and nobody's really talking about him. As a guy that could get drafted. I think for him, he left a lot of tackles. For as many tackles that he had, he left a lot of tackles out there on the field as well, and I think there is cause for concern there. Doesn't always take the best angle to the football either. But again, a leader on the back end of the defense there for the Jayhawks. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kenny Logan finds himself drafted, in the mid to late day 3 of the draft. So those are my views there with the defensive backs. And when we talk about the average, again, 57, 58 was really what that target was. That was what the average was, 3 years and 5 years. And I've got 58. So I'm right there, right on par with those numbers. It's just a matter of how many guys, where are they going to get slotted, where are they going to get drafted. I look at Dwight McGlothern, 5th round might be a little high. Daquan Hardy might be a little low. I think the same thing with Miller Bradford, probably move him up a little bit. So it's one of those things to where you don't really know exactly what a team's draft board is going to look like until obviously the draft happens. But I think you can get a little bit of everything if you're looking for whatever it is that you're looking for. A box safety, a nickel corner, a guy that can play on the outside, a physical presence, whatever you're looking for, I think you'll be able to find it here in this year's draft. Then we get to the specialists. Real quick through the specialists. We saw 3 kickers drafted in 2023. You're looking at about 2 for the 5-year average. We only saw 1 in each of the 2021 and 2022 drafts. So when you're talking about going back to 2019, Matt Gay, Austin Seibert, Justin Rohrwasser was a surprise there for the Patriots. Tyler Bass sticking it out there with the Bills. Sam Sloman. Evan McPherson was a stud pick there, round 5 out of Florida for the Bengals. Cade York, Browns still looking for a kicker. And then this past season, Jake Moody in round number 3. 49ers surprising. Then you have Chad Ryland and Anders Carlson going to the Patriots and Packers. I look at this year's kicking class. I look at Joshua McCarty out of Stanford, 6'2", 207. This dude was money for Stanford. I look at Cam Little out of Arkansas. I think he's the other kicker that has a chance in this year's draft class. But I look at Will Reichard out of Alabama. I think Carty comes off the board in round 5. I look at Will Reichard and at Bama, 6'1", 187. A guy that was a model of consistency there at Bama. I think he's going to be sorely missed for sure. When I look at Carty, 5th round, 6th round maybe. That's kind of in between there is kind of where I'm at with him. I actually have him coming off the board to the Rams. The Rams need a kicker. I think that's one of the things, one of the need areas for them. Really ever since they lost Greg Zuerlein, the Rams have been looking for a consistent kicker. And this last year they had Lucas Haversick. They brought in Tanner Brown right now. I think they could absolutely be on the market for a kicker. Joshua Carty, that'd be a nice pickup there in round 5 or round 6. Will Reichard, I've got him round 7. He may even end up coming off the board in round 6 as well. Like I said, this guy was just money for Alabama, and I've got him going to Green Bay. And the reason for that is I know Green Bay picked up Anders Carlson, but they brought in Greg Joseph. They brought in Jack Podlesny to put some pressure on Anders Carlson. Carlson, was a disappointment down the stretch for the Packers. I think, much like the Browns were doing, trying to find, Austin Seibert, Cade York. I think they end up drafting another kicker, and ultimately Will Reichard will upend Anders Carlson and take his job. I think that makes a lot of sense. And then Cam Little is another guy that could find his way onto a roster as well, potentially get drafted. The guy that I've got a lot of love for is Harrison Mevis out of Mizzou. The thicker kicker, 6 foot, 241 pounds. That 61-yard field goal there against K-State as time expired. Clutch City. This dude, he hammers the long kicks. Struggles a little bit from inside 40 yards, and that's where I think he may have to be a priority free agent, but a guy that I think could end up kicking at the next level for sure. Then you get into the punters, and the punters, look, we had 3 last year, 4 in 2022 before only just 1 in 2021. But when you go back to 2019, Mitch Wishnowski, Jake Bailey, 2020, there was Braden Mann and Sterling Hoffrichter, Presley Harvin in 2021, just the one guy. 2022, you got Jordan Stout, Jake Camarda, Matt Ariza. We know the situation with him. And then Trenton Gill, Bryce Behringer, Patriots drafted a kicker and a punter this last year. You got Brad Robbins and Ethan Evans coming off the board there as well. I look at this punting group and I look at Tory Taylor, and come on, this dude was flipping the field all day long there at Iowa. He was basically their best offensive weapon. Just really, again, flipping the field. 6'4", 223, the Aussie, Ray Guy Award winner. And look, I look at Green Bay. Daniel Whelan finished 25th in the league, 42 yards per punt, 39.7 net yards. That was dead last in the league. I think Iowa's cult hero, Tory Taylor, makes a hell of a lot of sense. He was Iowa's best weapon on offense because he would flip the field in an instant, pin offenses deep, have to face one of the top FBS defenses, backed up deep in their own zone. Look, Taylor ended the season with a staggering 93 punts, which was a sign of just how poor the Hawkeye offense was. 4,479 total yards. That was 896 yards more than the next closest punter. He even finished fourth with 48.2 yards per punt with 93 punts. This dude was just a model of consistency. Absolute beast. No wonder Hawkeye fans love this guy. I mean, you didn't want to go anywhere. You wanted to tune in and watch and see what Tory Taylor could do. Flipping the field. Again, biggest offensive weapon there for Iowa. And Green Bay, I think Green Bay could end up targeting him in round number 5. I really do. 169 overall. I don't think that's out of the question at all. He's the only punter that I have coming off the board right now. I think Austin McNamara out of Texas Tech is another guy to be on the lookout for. I think with McNamara, he wasn't invited to the combine, which was a shocker for me. But he's 6'4", 195. He's got good size. 46-yard average in his career there at Texas Tech. Only 55 punts this past season. I mean, come on. What were you doing there, Austin? You didn't kick 93. Obviously, Tech's offense was just a little bit better than Iowa's. And then Ryan Rico out of BYU, 6'4", 235. Big dude, for sure. And when you look at Ryan Rico and what he was able to do there at BYU, this guy was one of the few guys that had a higher per punt average than Tory Taylor this past season. 48.4, 47.4 yard per punt averaged in his career at BYU. And another dude that was a model of consistency. He's a guy that could end up coming off the board maybe in round number 7. Round 6, round 7, maybe round 6, likely round 7. But when I look at this group, I don't think you're getting more than 2, maybe 3 punters. And the same thing with the kickers. You're getting 2, maybe 3. I wouldn't push it with Harrison Mevis, just again because of the inconsistency there. But Cardi, Reichert, I think are locks. Taylor's a lock. Ryan Rico could potentially find his way in there. And then Austin McNamara, I think there's a chance there as well. So that ultimately puts an end to our NFL draft by the numbers. We've covered every position. I think we've talked about over 300 players. We've gone through and looked at the last 5 drafts and talked about a ton of the different players that we saw through each of the rounds of the draft. So really now the only thing left, because we only have a couple days until the draft, is my final mock draft. I'm going to get that together. I want to make sure that I'm releasing it before the NFL draft for sure. So I want to put a podcast out. It might be the night of the 24th, right before the draft. But I want to make sure that I do get a podcast together and get that done ASAP. Got to make sure that I get that fine tuning of my final mock draft together. I feel pretty confident with where I'm at. I've blocked out all the noise. Haven't really been paying attention to anybody else's mock draft. I've really kind of stuck to my guns because, look, I know my picks have done really well, and then I listen to someone, I change them, and then ultimately that's what gets me into trouble. And a lot of the picks that I had right, they go right down the drain. I would have had at least a good 10, 12 picks right, if not more, last season, the year before that, if I had just stuck to some of my original mock drafts instead of changing things at the very end. That's not going to happen here. I'm just going to go with my guns and see where things lie. We just don't know what's going to happen because there are going to be a lot of trades. I don't forecast any trades. I don't try to predict anything. I'm just rolling with what I got. And then if there are trades, then I just hope that I've targeted the right player to the right team. And maybe they don't take him. Maybe it's a team that's trading down and they don't take someone at 12. They're taking him at 25. But it's still, you still have that fit wherever it is, wherever they're going to ultimately take that player. So that's kind of what I am doing at this point, is making sure that I've got the players locked in. I got J.C. Latham right now going to the Chargers. I think the Chargers may be a team that trades down, but even if they don't, there is Joe Alt sitting right there. But I look at J.C. Latham, he's the better fit for Jim Harbaugh and what they need there at right tackle. So that just feels like the right fit. So we'll see how that plays out, and I'll get that podcast here in the next day or two. We got Tuesday, Wednesday. Those are the only 2 days I can really release it. So that's what I'm working on, getting that out and putting that together for you. So the draft is almost here. We've had a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully you'll be sticking around here. We'll also, after the draft, we'll do a draft recap and all of that as well. Before we put an end to the 2024 podcast series, we'll take a look at every pick that was made through all 3 days of the draft. So until next time, everyone, for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast. I've been your host, Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone. Until next time, I am out of here.